and unless you have absolutely no access to sports media whatsoever, you already know what is basically the biggest news in sports going on right now. I mean, it's even bigger than the playoff game tonight is bigger than NHL. This is something that is basically dominating everything going on right now, and that is the fact that the PGA Tour has decided to merge. The PGA Tour and DP World Tour have decided to merge with LIV Golf. This went through very shockingly to me on a breaking news from CNBC. It was not one of not one of any of the sports stations, not from the golf itself. It was actually CNBC who broke it, which made me think that some writer had gotten duped. Like, I thought that this was a joke and somebody had
because now with all the check marks disappearing, you don't know who's official or not official, but no big deal. Just the entire state of professional golf got turned upside down here on a Tuesday morning. Ironically enough, I believe tomorrow is 1 year when we had the first LIV event last summer in London. And it seems like we've had 20 years pass, with this kind of impasse here, and it's just been 365 days of time. And now here we are, not knowing where it's going to go next, but...
Yeah, definitely going to talk the RBC. You should hang around for that. We will give you our plays and thoughts and picks and things like that. But, I mean, this story being the biggest story in golf. This is not hyperbole, I don't think, whenever we say that this is the biggest story in golf of our lifetimes and maybe ever. Yes. And maybe only second to when they formed LIV in the first place, right? I mean, so here we are a year and a half later, and now we're talking about everybody playing nice in the sandbox. And listen, we will get to the betting implications of this as well, what we think may or may not be coming from this. But we can at least give you kind of the nuts and bolts of what we know for sure. And Kelley, when we take a look here, more than anything, we know now all of the legal battles and everything that were going on, those are now a thing of the past. That was part of the agreement in all of this, that any pending litigation is going to go away. So now this will no longer be fought out in the court of law, and everyone's at least going to play nice from that standpoint.
Yeah, and there is, we got released to the players by Jay Monahan today, PGA Tour Commissioner. So there are some things we know, some things that we have to speculate going forward, and some things that, listen, the PGA Tour and all these tours haven't settled on yet. And the players, most of them found out live on Twitter this morning. But just for what do we know right now? Okay, what's going to happen is that you're going to see PIF. Okay, what is that? That's the Public Investment Fund. That is what we've been talking about, that backs the LIV Golf Tour. So what is going to happen is that the Public Investment Fund, PGA Tour, DP World Tour will collectively come together to form a new entity. Okay, the Public Investment Fund will also become a premier corporate sponsor of the PGA Tour. The agreement between the three tours ends all the pending litigation, as you said, Matt. PGA and DP World Tours will work with LIV players on reapplying to tours after this season. There has been talk of fines for those players to rejoin because of all the money they got at LIV, but we'll get into some of that later. And PGA Tour will evaluate how to best integrate team golf into the professional game, which from a betting implication, I don't know about you guys, but I hate that idea.
Yeah, so we will talk certainly the betting implication, but Wes, let's just get to kind of I guess let's call it the most shocking thing about all this outside of the news itself, which was the fact that it seems like none of the players knew at all, right? Yeah. And I mean, maybe Rory McIlroy did just
maybe
because
a couple of the top guys.
They gave him a little bit of a heads up because he had been such a vocal person against LIV. You would like to think that they gave him a heads up, and maybe that has some of the reason to do with him being less vocal over the last few weeks about all of this and just kind of taking a step back with everything. But you see some of the top players. We even have a tweet here at Colin Morikawa, obviously a top 10 player in the world, saying he loves finding out about morning news on Twitter. And so it does raise a little bit of the question about, we thought that maybe the PGA Tour was taking a step in the right direction with offering more money up to these guys, trying to get the financial compensation in these tournaments up to where now we find out could have been all along, right? But instead they were not doing that. And now it goes back to us wondering again, are they tone deaf here? Are they honestly really understanding everything for the fact that these guys are waking up on a Tuesday morning and finding out, oh, by the way, everything that you told us to wave the flag for and beat the desk for
protect the shield.
And everything that we have done up to this point was all for nothing.
Yeah, and look, the meeting that apparently is going to be held about 2 hours from now as we are recording this program is a player meeting that is going to be up in Toronto where the RBC Canadian Open is being held. I imagine those gentlemen have a lot of questions and their agents and their caddies and everybody attached with them wondering okay, we defended this tour, and now you go ahead and do this deal. And if I'm a player, I kind of feel like I'm stabbed in the back a little bit because, you've left us hanging out to dry. It's like some guys turn down astronomical money.
Right.
But it's not just about the money. It was about standing up for the tradition of the PGA Tour and everything that comes along with it, standing up for the sponsors, standing up for your television partners, your staffs, your volunteers at all these events that go throughout the tour schedule throughout the year. And now all that's for naught. If you're a player, you kind of feel like you made me look like a jerk here because I stood up for what I thought was right at a big cost too. I think it was Joel Beal who put that out about Rory McIlroy. All of these players have lost something, whether it was money or whether it was fan support, friendships. Like this totally changed the game. And all of a sudden, we're expecting like a kumbaya moment with all of these tours together. It was just so surreal seeing on CNBC, and then Golf Channel eventually picked up the stream. They were televising, I think, the DP World Tour event from Sunday. It was like, shouldn't you break in for this? And they finally did. And to see Jay Monahan, the PGA Tour commissioner, and Yasir Al-Rahman, if I'm pronouncing that last name right. He is the governor, by the way, of the Public Investment Fund, which is run by the government of Saudi Arabia. He's the chair of Saudi Aramco, a big oil company, chair of Newcastle United, because the PIF owns 80% of that franchise in the Premier League. So to see them sitting together, it reminded me at least a little bit of a few weeks ago what we saw that Endeavor new company that was established with UFC and WWE, and to see Ari Emanuel and Vince McMahon sitting next to each other. But this was even more surreal to see this morning.
And I think the money is one of those things that we can't skip over, right? It is. We heard reports of $900 million for Tiger Woods.
That's the thing.
$300 million for Hideki. Right?
If we are to believe some of these rumors, right? I mean, it is something where if you wake up and you are one of those guys, it's more than feel like you got stabbed in the back.
Yes.
It is like, now I turn down not life-changing money, generational money for my kids' kids, and everyone in between. Yep. I mean, you're talking about guys like, and listen, he was at the time when this was all, Sam Burns was one of the top players on the planet. Like, he was offered, rumored close to $100 million, in which he turned down. And this is like a less established guy than a Hideki, who, by the way, could retire tomorrow and live off of his name in Japan. Like, it would be no problem.
Bemian had a very funny line, too, because Hideki apparently was waiting for a flight at Spirit Airlines. Like, he could have bought Spirit Airlines.
with all of this. But, some of these younger guys that did turn it down based off of the waving of the flag, the hey, we're going to, we're going to defend this. And really, and this is a guy that is waking up this morning, turning down 9 figures, hurt and injured, and wondering how his career is even going to play out whenever we move forward from all this. And so there's a lot of this. And look, we're not going to bury our head in the sand. There's also the thing that was going on for an entire year of the talk of the ethical things that were going on over there. That, listen, it doesn't take very long where you can go back and you can find Jay Monahan bringing up 9/11 in an interview about reasons why you should be supporting the PGA Tour and you should not be looking towards LIV and all of this. And so now it comes back to this whole thing where everybody was talking about from the very beginning. It's all about the almighty dollar anyway with any of this, and it's funny how your morals can change and how you can completely look the opposite direction whenever some of those dollars and almighty dollars, Wes, are heading in your direction.
Yeah, what did Scott Van Pelt of ESPN, I believe, by the way, tweeted the line from the movie New Jack City. The title, the character Nino Brown, played by Wesley Snipes. Always business, never personal. And boy, they're finding that out the hard way, a lot of these players and everybody attached to this game, because the players were loyal to this tour, those that stayed. Now you have guys coming back. It's like, are they going to be full-fledged members of the PGA Tour? And how are you looking at somebody where it's like, hey, this guy's making like $400 or $500 million, and I'm a number 3 player in the official world golf rankings, and I'm not getting close to that? Like, how's that going to fly?
Well, and there's we went over what we know. There's a lot of stuff that are additional reports, rumors, and everything else like that going on right now. Matt West, I know we've heard about potential fines for the LIV players returning, but how the heck does that work? Like, we're going to pay you
There's a lot of moving parts.
We're going to pay you $300K to join LIV. Okay, we're going to fine you $100,000 to come back. Cool, I made $200K, like scot-free. Like, that's fantastic. I think it's also important to note, you went over the the political stuff and ethical stuff, Matt, and that is something that we're not gonna focus on here, but you can't skip over it. You really can't. And I think it's worth bringing up at this time with when the PGA Tour went on the ultimate defensive. We have to keep in mind that the PIF was always just interested in getting into golf. They didn't really have an agenda to set out a LIV, a new league, or anything like that. It was that the PGA Tour wanted no part of them being a part of the tour. So it's, I mean, there's a lot of people to point fingers at today, but man, I keep thinking about that, circling back to that.
And they got what they wanted, too, the PIF. They wanted to get a foothold into American sports. So I'll quote Rich Lerner on the Golf Channel, because I think he's right. The Saudis won. That's what they wanted to do, is now they have a foothold in American sport on the PGA Tour, and I don't think they're going to stop there.
No, I mean, listen, it was one of those things where I'm sure it took them a year to figure out, we're not going to get distribution for this tour that we thought we were going to get distribution for. We thought this was going to be some big advertisement for us. It didn't work out. So what's the next best thing? Basically go in and buy the sport of golf, you know, and then we're going to get the distribution that we want. Then we're going to get all the promotion that we want. And again, it worked out for them. We're going to come back, give some final thoughts on this from betting implications, and then we will get into the RBC. It's Long Shots here on VC. Matt, Wes, and Kelley here talking about the biggest news in sports of the day, and it's weird that golf news is actually the biggest news in sports when we have the NBA playoffs, we have the NHL playoffs, and instead we get golf as the number one thing going on here. And listen, Wes, you just mentioned it on Golf Channel right now. Look, Brandon Chambly's going to get dragged through all this. All he did, he is paid to be a golf commentator, to give his opinion. That is what he gets paid to do. And so he did that. And all he did was what he was supposed to be doing. I mean, I know everyone's already trying to like drag him here and all of this, but I mean, he was a golf analyst at this point in his career. He gave his opinion, which is what he is supposed to do.
Right.
It is what it is. You know, he can still react to this however he wants to, and it doesn't change how his job, what he's supposed to be doing, and anything that happened over the last year and a half.
And I think what makes this so acrimonious, as we've seen over the last year time, is that it's not just a golf story.
Yeah.
It's a news story. It's a politics story. It's a geopolitical story here. With all the players that are involved here. And that's not going to change. Now, you know, in terms of the game, I think the game eventually, takes care of itself, because I was asked actually on a prior VSiN program on Lombardi Line by Stormy Bonatoni and Michael Lombardi, hey, how does this affect betting? I think it probably helps betting in terms of golf. It probably makes the game a better product. But there is a lot of scars, you know, within 1 year of time that has happened with this whole thing, and those aren't going to heal overnight.
Yeah, Kelley, when we look at this is really what this is all about. If we start to, this is a betting program, so we'll turn this to the betting side of things. But you know what this does, I think, in the at least from what we know, is going to be, hey, these lesser events are probably going to get some of these guys back, you know, that are going to be playing. Because look, everybody at LIV is not a superstar, by the way. Like everybody, you know, like literally, it's pretty top heavy actually, and then it's a bunch of the guys that were middling, maybe kind of on the ups. You have your kind of Joaquin Niemans and things of the world that were like, we liked to bet them every now and then, but they never really wanted. You know, it was like kind of guys that were on the up and up. Does that change? Do they get back into trying to work their way into, you know, the top 10 of the world? Stuff like that, I think from a betting standpoint, does kind of bolster some of those events for sure. The elevated events were already loaded and stacked as it was anyway. Now they're probably going to get even more loaded with the likes of the very top of the top with the DJs and the Brooks Koepkas and stuff entering back in. So I think from a betting perspective purely, which is what we focus on here most of the time on Long Shots, I do think this is better for us in the long term.
Absolutely. I mean, look, for someone like me who's struggled actually betting the elevated events this year, this is good news to me, just because we're just going to simply have more high quality
and better
golf.
numbers
And better
numbers because the shortest of short guys, now when you add a Koepka into the field and a DJ into the field and you start putting those guys back in there, those numbers are going to drift a little bit.
It becomes longer and longer. So yeah, I think whether it's that, Matt, or we're just talking about more golf to bet, right? And we're a golf betting program. Like, we love betting everything. We hear what you hear Wes Reynolds talking about betting DP World Tour all the time. It's all around the world with Wes Reynolds. That's what we call it for a reason. He's been doing everything on the DP World Tour. We love dabbling in the PGA Tour smaller events too. Just like you can maybe call this one this weekend, but we still bet it because we go off of statistical models And LIV was never tracking strokes gain data. That was difficult. We're not going to have to worry about that anymore, hopefully. Yeah. And that is a major, major benefit.
Now, Wes,
for how
we're speculating, right? I mean, we assume whatever happens to whether LIV lives on or whether it's like rebranded as some whatever it might be, that they will adopt the same practices that we're getting from the PGA Tour side of things. So again, for people who bet golf like we do, that is better again for us in the grand scheme of things, because we were talking about so many of these LIV guys whenever they would come over and play on PGA Tour or just trying to bet LIV events in general. It was a leap of faith, right? Yeah. We just kind of had to go with like, well, he finished 7th in this last one, so that's kind of good, I guess. And, you know, we just kind of were guessing as to how these guys were playing. Now we should actually have some hard data, which we really like to sink our teeth into whenever we bet these things.
Yeah, without question. And Kelley briefly mentioned the DP World Tour. They needed this to happen because they were losing relevancy. And I know we do usually on a week-to-week basis the Around the World with Wes segment and cover a lot of the DP World Tour. You got to think this will certainly strengthen their fields because a lot of their high-profile players have not been playing their events on a regular basis. So you get the DP World Tour, you get the PGA Tour. I don't know what is going to happen with the LIV Tour in its official form. I can't imagine it's going to continue as like a 54-hole event or whatnot, because it sounded like, just reading into the basics of the release that was sent out this morning, that the PGA Tour is still kind of going to have the operational control over this whole enterprise. But the PIF folks and the folks that fund LIV are going to have more of the financial say. You know, they have a seat on the board. So they didn't just buy a seat on the board. They have rights going forward, not to get too much into the details of the finances, but they have rights going forward to have the right of first refusal for anybody that wants to invest in the sport, essentially. So LIV basically gained financial control, but ceded operational control is what I'm reading into.
Yeah, I actually think that's a good description, from what I've read.
Yeah, and so what we're mainly getting at, and this is kind of the last opinion part of this, and we'll start to get into the betting aspect of the RBC, but if you are one of these top guys, I think every conversation really starting today and moving forward is going to begin and end with, where is my guaranteed money? What is my guaranteed money? I am not going to be playing, like you just mentioned, I'm not going to be playing with the 118th, ranked person in the world who is guaranteed $4 million salary or whatever. Like, you better come to me with some sort of something here, or I will not be showing up to any event outside of the very biggest events, because you are never going to get me to show. Like, look, we're going to talk about the RBC in a second. They have some stars that have shown up to this event. Now, some of those guys are sponsored by RBC, and so they're contractually obligated to show. But still, there are some stars that are showing up here for an event that is not elevated and not going to get a ton of money in their pocket, even if they do win it. I would be like, hey, bro, let me tell you something real quick. I get it, business decision. Also on my end, business decision. Let me see where the money starts.
I would, Matt, I would argue that the people that are celebrating the most today would be golf agents and lawyers that are involved, because lawyers are about to make a whole lot of scratch off of this.
But Wes, I mean, if you look at these guys, I mean, you're Colin Morikawa and things that have been coming out today saying they didn't know anything about all of this, and you can only assume, turn down 50+ million, somewhere along the way offers to get this done. I do think if you're the PGA Tour, I have no idea what negotiations have been going on behind the scenes, but there had to have been the understanding that some of these guys would be wanting to kind of make this right from a financial aspect. I can't believe they would be so naive as to think like, what we're going to do? We're going to make this announcement. Everyone's just going to be perfectly happy that they turned down 7, 8, 9 figures.
That's why I'm a little suspicious. I got to think some people knew, some players, especially at the top, knew about this. And certainly if they didn't, that question's going to be asked in about an hour and a half from now when Jay Monahan conducts that player meeting. I'm sure not only the players in person, but also guys Zooming in or Skyping in all over the country. Because we do have a major championship. And yet again, by the way, the U.S. Open going to take a back seat as a story to this whole thing with LIV Golf. It happened last year up at Brookline, and it looks like it's going to happen this year in L.A.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.